All right, I think we might get started. Thanks, everyone, for waiting. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for registering and coming along. Today's session is our 10th webinar, Compliance and Enforcement. Today we have myself, Carl Chua. We also have Peter Irvin and Simone Reineston, who's our Stakeholder Engagement Officer. And they will cover Peter will go through the general introduction of compliance and enforcement. He's from the southern region in Victoria. We'll also have Simone, who'll give you an update on our roadside information days. This session is pretty similar to the other sessions. If you have any questions midway, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll address them at the end of the session. If you could also mute your microphones throughout the presentation, that'd be good. And we'll record this session and send out the resources at the end as well. Peter, I think I might hand it over to you if you want to start your presentation. Maybe start with a bit of an introduction, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Carl. Hello. Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Irvin from the NHVR down in Victoria. I look after 45 enforcement guys down here in Victoria. We're part of Southern Region, which also includes the ACT at the moment, Tasmania and South Australia. We're pretty thin on the ground. I've got 40 odd guys on road in Victoria. There's about 20, 25 in South Australia and another dozen in Tassie, and a couple of officers in the ACT. Our whole philosophy on compliance and the regulator is all about targeted enforcement using whatever data and intel we've got, rather than trying to solve the problems of the world by pulling up one truck at a time, which is just never going to work. So we use a lot of data, and you'll see a lot of data here in these reports we're going to show you today. We try and target the top 5 to 10% of the non-compliant behaviour that we see. Most people want to do the right thing. We help them do the right thing with Simone's group and others, and Carl's group. But there's a very small cohort at the top of the old compliance pyramid that deliberately go to their way to make decisions not to comply, and they're the ones we try and deal with in the main. Getting into the report, next page, Carl. These are stats across Southern Region for this calendar year to date. Of note on this page here, we've put up about 7,500 trucks. They're proper, what I call proper intercepts. They're not just screenings through cameras or weighbridges. That's a conversation we've had with a driver on the side of the road that goes on average 16 minutes. The non-compliance rate for these trucks was just a touch under 50%. You'll see 46.9 on the right hand side there. That's pretty consistent across the states. We're lucky in Victoria. We're highly mobile here in Victoria, so we can we've got a few extra powers where we can pull trucks up mobile. So we tend to do a lot more mobile work and a lot more targeted work than the other states, just purely because we can. So our non-compliance rate is usually a little bit higher than the other states, but they're all about the same there. You'll see the ACT, the blue graph, the blue bar line graph there is all over the place. That's because they've only got 1 or 2 staff there, so it tends to be a bit sporadic. But it's pretty consistent throughout the year. We're trying to get those graphs to trend downwards. Victoria's only been part of the regulator compliance model for just on 2 years now. So over the next couple of years, we want to see those graphs trending down, if at all possible. On the left-hand side there, you'll see a pie chart there of defect notices. Defective vehicles is a big part of our job. Most of the stuff we see is minor. Occasionally we see some major stuff, which I'll show you some pictures of in a minute. And we deal with a lot of very minor stuff with what we call a self-clearing defect notice, which is basically the driver just gets to fix it on his own time without having to bring it into Vic Roads or one of the road agencies to get it cleared. But the guys that are driving really bad trucks, we issue major groundeds and majors to them, so they get towed away. But I'll show you a picture of one of those. I'm going to go next page for me, Carl. This one happened early in the year. That's a suspension system on a semi-trailer. That broke out at Werribee. For all you that know Melbourne, Werribee is an outer suburb on the west side of Melbourne. They chained it up with dogs and chains, and they decided to drive it all the way across to Dandenong, through Melbourne, through the tunnel, over the bridge, like that. And our guys happened to see it going the other way and saw sparks coming off the roadway because that was dragging on the road. But they thought they could get it to the repairer without putting it on another truck and getting it floated there. They decided to just wing it in amongst traffic like that, which is just hugely unsafe. But they'll be going to court for that. That's an example of some of the worst stuff we see. Next one, Carl. This is just showing you how we work here in Victoria. On the left-hand side there, you'll see most of our intercepts are mobile intercepts. So we're out and about in traffic looking for stuff that's offending. We do a little bit of way station work at the way bridges, along with static checks in parking bays and so forth, but the overwhelming majority of our intercepts are done mobile. Next one, Carl. These are some of the type of offences that we see. In Victoria, we can pull drivers up for heavy vehicle national law offences and also state-based offences under the Road Safety Act and road rules as well. This particular chart here just covers the HVNL breaches. You'll see the main breaches that we see out on the road are fatigue, load restraint, mechanical, little bit of permit issues, which I'll go into a bit more detail later on, which will interest you guys. But by far and away, fatigue and load restraint are our biggest issues that we see on the road. And there's definitely a correlation between those and heavy vehicle crashes as well. Next one, Carl.
Excuse me. Sorry,
Yes,
Anne-Marie here
sure.
from Toowoomba.
Yes, ma'am.
We're not seeing, well, the screen just changed. So all that you were talking about for the last 2 or 3 slides, we were still looking at the statistics. So not really sure where you're up to. Is this picture your next one, or have we missed quite a bit?
Hi, Anne-Marie. I think you did see all the relevant statistics that Peter was going through. The slides may have looked similar. Do you want to just jump back, Carl, and show the last couple of slides?
Yeah, but
will we
bear
be
with me.
sharing this as well?
Yes.
Okay. But it was just statistics there, Anne-Marie.
Yeah.
Up in, the last couple of slides after the axle on the ground thing.
So we didn't, that one that's showing now with more yellows and purples and stuff, didn't see that one. It didn't change.
I'll go back to that one. This one, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, the one that I can see now is the HVNL category summary. Didn't see that one before during conversation. What was before that one?
So we've got location summary here.
Yeah, that's just come up. That was different. Didn't see that one before either.
That's odd.
I'll go to the one quickly just before. Yeah, that was the vehicle image.
Yep, didn't see that one either.
I'll read out the titles of each page just so everyone's got it up on their screen. There might be some delays. I'm not sure what's going on.
All right. Let me just. I'll continue with the rest here. But thanks for letting us know, Anne-Marie.
No, okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to just quickly go back over that? I think most people saw them, Anne-Marie, but yeah, Pete, was there a couple of keys from those quick slides?
Yeah, I'll quickly go over it again. Yeah, this one just shows our method of working here in Victoria. It's highly mobile, other than way station work. A lot of the other states tend to do a lot more static work at way stations, but in Victoria, we try to work as mobile as we can. We find that a good way of targeting the offenders. Next slide, Carl.
Sorry guys, it's just lagging a bit, I think, because the presentation's a bit thick. I'll just quickly shut it and reshare it. Bear with me 1 second.
All right.
Right, all yours, Peter. Apologies, everyone.
That's all right. If you want to just go back to the one prior to that one, I'll just quickly go over that in case someone missed it too. Yeah, this just shows our main offences under the Heavy Vehicle National Law. As I was saying before, fatigue and load restraint are our biggest breaches that we find here in Victoria. Next one, Carl. You should see a picture of a truck there, a little 2-axle rigid truck that's grossly overweight. He was 183% overloaded. He was meant to go 9 tonne on that axle, but he went he went 16.5 tonne, which is just phenomenal. They're the type of trucks that do damage to your roads and your network, bridges, etc., etc. Axle weights are a huge cause of road infrastructure damage, but that's one of the worst ones we've seen this year on a little truck. But it's quite common, unfortunately, but that gives you an example of some of the stuff that we see out on the side of the road. Next one, Carl. Here's another one. You should see a tow truck with another tow truck on top of it. A rigid truck on top of it. No words for this one. This was on Sydney Road in the top end of Melbourne, highly built up industrial area. This is just, it's got so many things going wrong with it, it's not funny. There's a load security there issue. Those back wheels are barely touching the back of the tray. One slight bump and that's going to come off. He's done the right thing though by putting a red flag on the back. That's not going to help anyone running up the back of that one. It's also the rear overhang's grossly over as well. That's the type of stuff that causes accidents and takes out parked cars and all sorts of stuff. But next one, Carl. This one you should see at the top left-hand corner, the compliance checks. In the regulator, we measure not only the trucks that we pull up, but what we check them for and what their non-compliance rate is. So on the left-hand side there, it's probably the easiest way to go. Of all the trucks we pull up, we check basically 90% of them for roadworthiness, 89.8%. Of those, we find 22.4% have got an issue of some type. We'll weigh roughly 6.5% of all the trucks that we pull up, and of those, just under 2% are non-compliant. We don't tend to weigh trucks just for the hell of it. We go off various visual indicators off the truck that whether it's overloaded or not, or whether we think it's overloaded, then we'll pull the scales out and weigh it, but we just don't weigh trucks lock, stock and barrel. We check basically half the trucks we pull up, we measure them to make sure they're compliant. Load restraint, we'll check 50% of them to make sure they've got the correct number of chains or ropes on board. Of those, about 4% are non-compliant. We really want to get that down. I know 3.8% doesn't sound like much, but it's a huge cause of accidents, especially in metro areas where stuff's coming off trucks, and it might only be a paper cup or something like that, or a box of tissues, but people tend to swerve when they see this stuff coming off trucks, and it just causes a conga line of accidents down the road. We'll check about 85.4% so far this year of trucks we check for work diaries and their driving hours for fatigue, and of those 5% we find offending. And each state's roughly the same there. You'll see the graphs on the right-hand side there with the 4 states that have currently transitioned across the regulator. They're more or less roughly the same compliance rates. Some states tend to have a little bit more fatigue than Victoria, like South Australia and others, but the trends are pretty well across southern region. I suspect they're probably the same across the whole of Australia as well. Next slide, Carl. Here's another truck, a truck and dog on the outskirts of Melbourne with carting a load that's not designed for that truck. They've got steel pipes coming out the back of the truck. Very dangerous, hard to see that at 100 k's coming up behind that. That's an accident waiting to happen. Just totally inappropriate. They knew it was inappropriate and they did it anyway. It's some of the stuff we see. Next one, Carl. Yep. What have we got these are some of the trends. Just that graph on the bottom is the one to look for there. That's a graph over the course of this whole year. The one of note there is the green graph with the Mount Everest peak in the middle of it. In May, June, July this year, the regulator conducted the National Roadworthy Survey, where we really concentrated heavily on mechanical checks using our vehicle inspection trailers all across Australia. We didn't do much else for about six or 7 weeks, other than use those trailers checking out the mechanical standards of the vehicle. So that's why there's a bit of a peak there for mechanical breaches, but otherwise it's fairly steady. Next one, Carl. This is it's sort of funny, but it's not. This chap put very, very extremely dark window tint on his, that's on his windscreen. Then he realised he couldn't see through it. So then he's cut an archway out so he could see and drive rather than pull it back off. We see a lot of this, people putting dark tint or extra dark tint on their vehicles or car side windows or windscreens. It's extremely dangerous when you come to dull conditions at dusk and especially at night time. But this is some of the stuff that we see. You wouldn't believe it if you didn't see a picture of it. Next one. Here's a little bit of a breakdown in Victoria of the state breaches versus the heavy vehicle national law breaches. Down the bottom there, you'll see it's about probably 1/3 is state-based breaches, and the other 2/3 is the heavy vehicle national law stuff. We try and concentrate on road rule breaches, driver behaviour, phones, seatbelts, stuff like that, speeding. We get a lot of unlicensed drivers, suspended drivers, disqualified drivers. Quite a bit of unregistered vehicles. It's always quite high, but we're lucky in Victoria. If we see them, we can deal with them. But our core function is the HVNL, but we don't turn a blind eye when it comes to the road rule type of breaches as well. Next one, Carl. This is an accident that luckily didn't hit another vehicle, just ploughed through a fence. That was in Western Victoria only a couple of weeks ago. That was due to mechanical failure of the tow coupling arm attached to the truck. It had a crack in it and finally gave way. And this thing probably weighs upwards of 25 tonne. Continued on down the road without anyone being able to control it. Went into some bushes and hit a fence. Extremely lucky there was no one coming the other way at the time, otherwise that would have been a horrendous accident. But that's one of the reasons why we concentrate heavily on mechanical standards on vehicles, and that they're in good shape. Otherwise stuff like that happens. Next one, Carl. This is a bit of a breakdown on some of the things we find wrong with the heavy vehicles. That middle section down the bottom, was the main issues we see are lights, reflectors, seatbelts. We see a lot of trucks with seatbelts removed or temporarily fixed by drivers themselves by tying bits together to make up one seatbelt. We see a lot of that. A lot of drivers pull the seatbelt out totally, which is, in this day and age, I just don't understand it. We see a lot of rust conditions in trucks, cracks in chassis, etc. Wheels, tyres and hubs, poor tread or no tread, cracks in the wheels itself. We see a lot of suspension issues, which causes a lot of problems on the asphalt pavement if the suspension and the steering components aren't right. And brakes is another big one too. We see a lot of issues with brakes, not only not working, but either out of balance. So when a driver hits the brakes, the truck won't pull up in a straight line, which is a recipe for disaster as well. Next one, Carl. Not only do we hand out quite a few tickets and we go to court quite a bit, we also spend a lot of time on the side of the road talking to drivers about what they could do better. most drivers are trying to do the right thing, so we'll try and help them along with Simone's team, steer them in the right direction, give them some good advice. But you'll see up the top right-hand corner there, out of those 17,000 interceptions, 3,000 of them we've actually spent time on the side of the road to give them an education session on a particular topic that we found on the side of the road, or the driver might have initiated some questions for us. On the graph itself, we do a lot of work talking to drivers about work diaries, what their responsibilities are, how to fill in a logbook, because it is quite complicated. There's a lot of things they need to know. We talk a lot about load restraint. There's a lot of myths out there about load restraint and what is good and what is not. The top right-hand corner you'll see under that 3008 education category, that's how many hours we've spent this year talking on work diaries, 258 hours on the side of the road. So it's fairly substantial. I'd like to think that's a great improvement over previous decades. When I started in this job about 20 odd years ago, there wasn't much education. The enforcement agencies didn't encourage too much education. It was all about catching as many as we could. But we try and our whole aim these days is to change future behaviour. So if we can do that, if we can deal with a driver on the side of the road, we don't want to see him again. We don't want to pull him up next week and the week after for the same breach. We want to solve the problem then and there if we can. Next slide, Carl. This is a video, Carl. If you can click on it. This is another bad one. It only goes for a couple of seconds. Hopefully you can see it. That's the steering wheel was just sitting on that pin, wasn't attached at all. And he was driving around Melbourne like that, had been for months apparently. So dangerous, it's not funny. He didn't seem to think it was a big deal, but we put that off the road. That got towed away, obviously. But you wouldn't believe it if you hadn't seen it. Next one, Carl. This one will probably interest you the most with your permits and access stuff that gets initiated by the road managers. This year we've done 483 detailed permit checks on the side of the road. Most of the stuff we see on the side of the road, they usually don't have a permit to begin with. That's a lot of our issues. Occasionally they'll go off route, but most of our problems with access are trucks that just shouldn't be there in the first place. They haven't even taken the time to have a chat to the road manager or the regulator about getting a permit. What else is on there? We've got performance-based standard permits are probably our biggest offenders. The PBS stuff, truck and dogs. There are a huge number of them around Victoria at the moment with all the construction work going on, and we expect that to increase quite a bit once the big Melbourne projects get up and running in full steam. We do have, they're by far and away our biggest issue, the PBS vehicles. The oversized, overmass stuff, they're a pretty good industry in general terms. They know their responsibilities quite well. They know how to restrain loads. They know what routes they can go on. Occasionally we get them offending, but in general terms, they're pretty good. That's about it on that one, Carl. This is one example earlier in the year out near Orbost. We caught this thing that had no permit, grossly overloaded. From memory, I think it was about 170% overloaded on that drive axle group. It was just poorly loaded, had no permit, and it was going across poor roads to begin with in eastern Victoria. They're not designed for that sort of stuff up in the hills. We don't know how many old bridges it might have gone over. It wouldn't have got a permit to get over them anyway, but that vehicle was grounded and until it complied. It's got a date in court. Next one, Carl. I can only speak for a southern region, but here's some contact details. If a lot of our work is generated by the heavy vehicle confidential reporting line, where drivers and companies and councils and general public can call in anonymously if they want to, providing us with information. It gets triaged by our group up in Brisbane, then gets fed out to the relevant states, and we follow each and every one up. We've done several hundred of these this year. Most of the intel that we get from this confidential reporting line is spot on, and we try and get to each and every one of them. Councils can call into that line if they have to. Probably the best bet for the council is just to call the general number down the bottom if they have issues in their patch with trucks disobeying curfews, or they've got problems with trucks going off route in their local areas. Then we can feed that down to the local officers and they can take a look at it. There's also a couple of emails there, one for Victoria. You can email your inquiries or intel through to that one. Or if you're in the other states, you can do it to the general email address there, number 2. We do chase up a lot of stuff at councils. I know in Victoria we have thousands of curfew roads that have been deemed curfews by the local road managers and big roads. We spend quite a bit of time patrolling those, especially in some of the hotspots here in Melbourne, in the inner west, in Yarraville. But if you have any of those sort of issues, I'll take some questions in a minute, but we're more than happy to help out the councils wherever we can. Thanks, Carl.
All right, thanks, Peter. I'll just go through the questions in the chat. I think there's quite a few here. Just see here.
One thing while you're doing that, Carl, that I thought maybe I'd just reiterate, especially because there was a few people that joined a little bit late in the conversation. I'm sure very early on, Pete mentioned perhaps our targeted enforcement. You know, we don't just nab any truck that comes past. This is correct, isn't it, Pete? We've got a very specific way of working with intelligence and with other data sources to identify those operators that are doing the wrong thing. So when Pete says most of the operators we see have got this or that, he's actually talking about that targeted group of non-conforming operators, I suppose. Am I right in saying that, Pete?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Just thanks, Sim. Just with the comments, they're mainly just comments about before. We do have one from Robert Duncan. Does the southern region have IAP?
Yes, in Victoria we do. We have IAP. I can't speak for the other states, unfortunately. I don't have much to do with IAP myself, but a lot of the HPFVs and the PBS vehicles are on IAP. New South Wales are on IAP, as is Queensland, but I'm not an expert on that. But we do have it here in Victoria, but I'm not sure about the other states in Tassie and South Australia.
There aren't any other questions in the comments. I'd be happy to just open the floor up if anyone wanted to ask Peter a question, or happy to, if you want to go off mute if you like.
Yeah, just want to encourage all the councils, especially in southern region where we're already a part of the regulator. If you've got any issues in your local patches or any transport companies, we're getting a lot of complaints from residents about transport companies. We're happy to chase them up for you. That's our job. You can contact us. We'll get to them when we can, but we're more than happy to help out all the councils and the local road managers.
Belinda, you have your hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I was just really interested in the stat around out of the 4,000 and something vehicle issues, 400 of them were seatbelt issues.
Yep.
So are they being tampered with, or?
Yes, probably half of them are totally worn out. They're frayed, they're cut, they've had the buckles broken off, so they've put new shackles on themselves. A lot of them will be where drivers have removed the seatbelt totally, because truck drivers historically have never liked wearing seatbelts. The last 20 years they've got a lot better, but there was some myths going back in the 70s and 80s, I believe, where truck drivers thought if the truck was going to roll over, they didn't want to have a seatbelt on. They reckon they could jump out the cabin door and get away from it that way. But that's, unless they're the $6 million man or Superman, that's not going to happen. I've been to far too many fatal accidents to disprove that one.
So do we have any comms specifically targeting that around that myth for starters of exiting the vehicle, and also around maybe the fines or something that we can specifically target?
It's not a real big issue these days. Back in the mid-2000s it was, and we did a lot of comms when I was in Vic Roads regarding seatbelts, and we did a lot of work back then. But most of it's now, it's pretty good. I know there's 400 odd seatbelts there out of 17,500 trucks, so it's not a great number. But
I've had 2 fatalities in my region, heavy vehicle fatalities in the 3 years that I've been the road safety officer here, and both of them had no seatbelts.
Okay, they didn't have them fitted at all.
They weren't wearing them.
All right. Okay. Yeah. No, we do see them. It's not common, but we do catch them. But the stuff we see, a lot of them have got lap sash belts, which we can't see when we're driving past, so we can't tell whether they've got one on or not. But we'll pull them up and have a quick chat. But yeah, a lot of them have pulled them out, which is just crazy. But we do see a hell of a lot of faulty seatbelts, ones that don't retract, ones that are so badly frayed and torn, they're not going to do a thing if they have to come to a sudden halt.
Well, if you needed some data or something like that, if you were interested in a campaign in your region and you wanted some information from us, I'm sure we might be able to provide some of that to help support what you're doing, particularly as it could be of an area of interest for you.
Thanks, Sam.
Just have a comment here from Emily. We have difficulty managing customer expectations regarding heavy vehicles. Do you have any fact sheets for residents about general access vehicles? Emily, yeah, we do have a few fact sheets. I think we're also developing or improving one of our web pages. I'll be able to send you that directly. I'll also attach it to this presentation slides for everyone to see as well.
Yeah, expectations are hard to manage. I know around truck curfews we have a lot of problems. Local residents that come in and out of the area, so they don't tend to realise that a truck curfew is not a truck ban. There are exemptions, vehicles allowed there if they're picking up and delivering, and there's a whole range of exemptions. So they just assume it's a full-time truck ban. So if they see a truck, they think it's offending, but we have to pull it up and have a chat to the driver to work out whether it is offending. We just can't deal with it like that, but it's an ongoing issue.
Thanks, Peter. We have another comment from Joan. Apologies if I got that wrong. Do we have to provide evidence such as pictures when reporting? If we get a report from residents regarding trucks, it's difficult to collect evidence when the time period provided to us in application is broad or they didn't apply.
Yeah, most of the stuff we get is it's just a bit of intel for us. So if you've got issues in say a local town, pictures are always great. They're fantastic. They help us narrow down who we need to target. But if not, we'll just patrol the area. We'll send a crew there if we can. They'll suss it out, see it for themselves, and have a chat to a few companies while we're there, and hopefully knock it on the head that way. But if the residents or the complainants do happen to get a photo of a truck offending, even better. It makes our job a lot easier. But just because they haven't got a photo or the rego details, it's not the end of the world. We can still get down there and patrol it. We only have 45 officers around Victoria. 25 of them are in Melbourne. I've got a small smattering out in the country areas, so we can't get to every area on a daily basis. But if we do have intel that a particular town's got some issues, we'll send some guys there overnight and take a look at it themselves.
Yeah, the more information, the better, of course. Communication is key, and it's an ongoing process with your stakeholders, as is ours, in terms of letting your residents know what you've approved or bits and pieces. But if the more information, the more we can do with it, I suppose. I just had that very example come through late last week for a council in Tasmania. There was a resident reporting that trucks were using a road and there shouldn't be trucks there. That's all we got. No information about what sort of trucks. Yeah, like somebody said, as soon as you put a trailer on the back of it, it becomes an issue. So we can certainly go there. We can have a look around, but the more information, the better, and then we can actually target, because it might be a particular operator. We can go and have a chat to them and let them know what your preferred route is or what have you.
Thanks, Simone. if there's no more questions, I might pass it back to you, Simone, for the roadside update, if you like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to keep looking at those questions as they come in, and certainly I think a theme is around communication and sharing information, and that's something, as Pete's alluded to a couple of times this morning, that we can certainly help you with. The regulator is all focused about an education approach, education first approach. That's what we're all about. So we want to get out and speak to our customers before issues occur on the side of the road. In the stakeholder engagement group, which I'm a part of, we have got a couple of vacancies if anyone's interested, but we do have somebody normally based in South Australia, Victoria, Queensland and New South Wales. So we get out and about working with local governments, working with industry and doing things like roadside information sessions or seminars, webinars, all sorts of bits and pieces. And I wanted to just plant a seed in all of your heads today that if you've got an idea on how we might be able to communicate better across your municipality or region, then have a chat to us. You know, we might be able to work something out that could be of benefit to you. We also, you know, we talk about data and how Pete applies that to his roadside compliance, but we've also got a lot of data in the portal now, as I'm sure you're aware, but I'm going to show you again. We've got some really great analytics information about your council, what's going on and what you've approved in terms of consent permits and things like that. The way to navigate to this report is just on the main portal screen, which I hope you can all see there. You go down to access permits, reports. The drop down will take you to analytics reports. And the one I'm going to open today is the road access volume report. Now, this has got all data across the nation. Your view is just your council, and certainly I can sort of dig into this data with you individually or as groups of councils if need be. But what I wanted to show you was just the level of information, and particularly about the customers, the key customers in your region. So you might have heard that there's some issues with moving certain types of goods. Perhaps it's quarry goods, perhaps it's forestry, timber, perhaps it's livestock, whatever it might be. You might think, gosh, there needs to be an education session with that sector because they're not doing the right things by us, and, you know, whatever it might be. So how do you then identify who to speak to? You can use this analytics report to look at your key customers. So across the nation, we've got you know, we can see our top 10 and more customers here by volume of consent requests. So we can look at your council, see who are your key customers and make sure that you're connected with them. Perhaps you've had issues with one and you really should sit down and have a bit of a chat. Perhaps you're interested in having a look at how you can improve your access, you know, improve compliance by, you know, Pete mentioned that sometimes operators don't get permits for a number of different reasons. And one of the ways that we can steer them to getting permits is by having clearly defined networks. And by you, as I'm sure many of you already have done, identifying which roads you don't want people going on and which roads you do want people going on. Pre-approving those roads, saying, yes, if a vehicle fits a certain envelope type, we'll allow it to go down. They still need a permit because we want to know what volumes are accessing that road, but it goes through in a much timelier manner. You can imagine if something goes through in a matter of days versus a couple of weeks, then operators are going to be more inclined to trust and use that process. Thank you. So yeah, education, utilise us. We are a resource for you. I mentioned talking to industry with you. We certainly can also come in and do with Carl and his team, do some sort of engineering specific sessions if you've got some key questions. We can also refer you back to webinars 1 through to 9, which gives you a lot of info already, but we're happy to work with you there. We also get out and speak to works departments at councils about chain of responsibility and what they need to be aware of. So there's many ways that we are here to help, and all I would say is don't be shy, reach out, just ask us, and if we can't do it, we'll try and partner you up with somebody who can. Thank you.
Thanks, Simone. Yeah, and I'll leave all our contact details. If you want to get in touch with us directly, feel free to give us a call or email us directly. Simone, just with the analytics report, we have a question. Is it possible to split the PBS data that's on there?
Yeah, it is. You can go and actually select the different levels, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd be happy to go through that with you, and it's in the filters sections on the right-hand side. So you should be able to bring it down even further than that. So look at the different levels of PBS. Yeah, where are you from, Ange? Tell me. We'll organise a time to chat. I'll share my info, and yeah, we'll catch up, Ange. We'll have a look at that together if you like.
No worries. I think that sort of brings us to the end of the webinar. Just want to say thanks to Peter and Simone for coming along. Thanks for everyone for attending. Our next one is planned for the 24th of November. It'll be on the NHVR Next Generation Route Planner and a bit of an update on the maps from the spatial team. I'll probably send out the Eventbrite stuff by the end of the week. That will be, I think, a pretty thick session as well. Just want to say thanks to everyone. I'll send out the slides and the recording as soon as it's ready.
Thank
No worries.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.